Good morning, everyone.
Morning, Ada.
Morning.
We can start.
Good morning to all our colleagues, especially welcome to all our colleagues from the NRF and all the grant holders and supervisors attending this session this morning. Firstly, we'll have Mr. Lehlonolo from the NRF. Thank you, Lehlonolo.
Morning, colleagues. I'm Lehlonolo from the NRF. I'll be presenting on the rationale and processes of the NRF with regards to the new policy. So let me start sharing and then we'll take it from there. Hey there.
Yes.
Oh, no, I was sharing. I just wanted you to confirm my slide from your side.
I don't see it on my side.
Okay. Let me do this.
So all attendees, while we're waiting for Mr. Lehlonolo, and all questions and answers will be answered after all the live sessions.
Oh, it's still uploading, Heide. Hello, Heide. Is it okay now?
I'm just going to ask the technical team. I can't see it on my side.
Okay.
It is visible from outside.
Oh, it's visible now.
I can also see it.
Okay, okay. Yes, shall we start, colleagues? Good morning once again. I'm Lehlonolo from the NRF within the Directorate of Human Infrastructure Capacity and Development, and then within the Next Generation of Researcher Unit. So within the postgraduate portfolio, I'm managing several projects. One of them is that of honors, and then few of the TWAS program, and that of SASOL from master's, doctoral, and then honors. So in terms of the mandate of the NRF, this is the mandate of the NRF, which is developing, supporting, promoting and advancing research and human capacity development. And then the second one, developing, supporting and managing and maintaining national research facility. The third one, supporting, promoting public awareness and engagement. The fourth one, it's promoting, developing and maintaining national science system. You know, as the NRF, we come a long way in terms of moving from how we manage our grants in terms of the system perspective and in relation to how applications come to the NRF. Why do I say we come a long way? We started doing grants from the paper. One can call it a manual application. So the manual application, you receive applications and then they'll come to us and then we'll do it so manually. But as time progressed, we've been doing this for more than 15 to 20 years, yes. So as time progressed, now we went into the online system. But all along, what was happening was we had different streams of funders. We received different funding from different partners, our ministries, DHEAD, and other funders. I think you are aware of funders such as the ones that I've already mentioned, the TWAS, the SASOL, SASAC, and other funding partners. So in terms of how our applications were being managed, there was no single entry in terms of the eligibility, in terms of how applications are assessed at the NRF. Then the NRF embarked on the policy development. So before the policy, what we've been using was, as guidelines, we were using the ministerial guidelines from the DSI. So the ministerial guidelines were giving us prescriptions, we can call them prescription, on how we should manage our grants, how we should handle applications, and how we should advance the mandate of the NRF. So the rationale behind, before I go there, the rationale behind the development of the new policy is to give equitable access in terms of access into the system, in terms of the postgraduate funding, is to give access to applicants, yes, at the postgraduate level, is equity, and then throughput and success. We are all aware that our country is facing major challenges. One of the challenges, few of the challenges are unemployment, poverty, and unemployment, poverty. Yes, those are some of the challenges that we are facing. So because of the low enrollments at the higher institutions in terms of the postgraduate, then the NRF saw it fit that we should develop this policy, and then this policy is addressing, amongst others, the low progression rates from honors, masters, and doctoral. And then from that point, now the NRF crafted this policy that we are all aware of, which kickstarted this year going forward. So in terms of the eligibility criteria, I'm just giving you the background in terms of the policy, and then other slides I will be just flowing because you'll be having the background and then the rationale behind. So the age we are starting in terms of the eligibility, the age is for honors is 28 years, masters it's 30, and then doctoral is 32 years in the year of the application. So our data have shown that those that we are funding graduate normally, complete their studies at the age of around 22 years. So someone might ask, why did the NRF came up with such policy of saying 28 years, whereas they want to address the issues of unemployment, whereas the issues of poverty has to be factored in. So we are aware of such. So if someone graduate at that level, they have a chance of deciding within that 6 years to say whether they want to go for employment, whether they want to go for furthering their studies. So you have 6 years from that honors, from that undergrad, to decide whether you want to go into honors, you want to go into masters, you want to go into doctoral. So now we go into the targets for the bursary in terms of the allocation. This is the targets in terms of the nationalities, in terms of the gender, the race, and people living with disability. So from the ministerial guidelines, I won't dwell much into that. We're targeting 87% South Africans, permanent residents, and citizens. So now we have increased in terms of the target. Now we are going for 95. And then in the SADC region or international, in the rest of the world, we are targeting 5% and then 55%. And then you can see even the breakdown for black and white. And then as we move along, the awards that have been made in terms of the 2021 academic year, these are the awards. So if we check, if we check under honors, for example, or let's first focus on the enrollment at the higher education institutions. The enrollment data for 2021 is that 172,004. And then we as the NRF, we operate, we fund only postgraduate students, and then we can only fund based on the budget that we have been given by the ministry and the partners, we can only fund around 5% of those applications. And then this enrollment data, it doesn't include those people that are in the doing postgraduate diplomas, because we used to fund those, but based on the strategic objectives of the NRF, now we are focused more on the honors, because honors has that component, the research component, which we are interested in as the NRF. So this year's allocation for honors, we funded 32% of those, masters 30, extension masters 67, extension doctoral 73, doctoral 52. And then overall applications that we've received from the institutions, it's 14,387. So one might ask, what happened to the other applications? So the issue of budget comes into play, and then other factors as well in terms of how we are making our allocations. So if you check the ones that were eligible but could not be funded because of the budget are over 8,000. So 8,000 of those could not be funded because of reasons such as budget constraints. And then as we move along, in terms of honors, full cost of study, partial cost of study, 62% is full cost, and then 38% is partial cost of study, masters 58, and then partial cost is 42, doctoral 68, and 32% is partial cost of study. And then in terms of the demographics, this is the breakdown in terms of the citizens and then international students. And then if you check under honors, for honors we don't have any international students, we don't fund any international students, hence we have the zeros there under international students. But even those targets, you can see we are closer to those targets. We are not really we are not really meeting those targets, but because the policy, we just started implementing the new policy, there is there are good signs that these targets are achievable. And then if you check honors, for example, in terms of the targets for blacks, we are looking for 90%, but for blacks, we went above that target of 97%. And then in terms of the eligibility, this is the eligibility criteria. We are saying anyone who wants to be eligible for our funding should meet the minimum entry requirement of 65%. So 65% gives you an entry into the NRF in terms of assessment. But there are different modalities in terms of whether an applicant gets full cost of study or partial cost of study. So the ones that are considered for full cost of study are exceptional academic achievers or financially needy students, or those that are students living with disability. So for partial cost of study, it's anyone that has managed 65%, but they are not falling within the categories that I've mentioned. So for honors, as an academic achiever, 75% gives you entry in terms of the eligibility into being considered for full cost of study. And then 65% is just minimum entry for everyone. And then master's, doctoral is the same principle. So for those that are living with disability, what we normally require you to upload in the application is the proof of that disability. To say, this is the proof medical certificate of proving my disability, but I meet the 65%. What we are saying is that you should meet that 65%, and then you will be considered for full cost of study. Then as I move along, these are the eligibility criteria that I've already talked about. Honors, it's only South African citizens and permanent residents. Doctoral masters and extension support masters and doctoral, it includes also international students. And then in terms of the age, I've already talked about age in the beginning to say our data have shown that our students, normally the ones that we are funding, they graduate earlier than this age at honors, and then they progress through masters, they progress to doctoral. So by the age of 35, most of them are already out of the system, and then hence we are saying the age limit is there so that the completion rate of 35 can be achieved, and then so that our grant holders can now become productive in terms of their field of research, and then become expert in those fields. Then the application process of the online system. Remember, I've already told you that we are no longer doing the paperwork. Everyone has to come through one entry. It's the online system. So on the online system, we have templates. So if you go and then read the framework document, you read the application guide, those are the major documents in terms of how the application works, in terms of how the process works, in terms of different sections. So the student applies, and then they have two options. It's same pathway, but it's two options. If you are financially needy, when we look at number one, then you say, okay, I'm not financially needy, but I have proof. For example, those that are living with disability, I have proof. Then you won't be taken through the financial means assessment. Our partner in terms of financial means assessment is the ISFEP, the Ekusasa Financial ISFEP partners, and then those are the proofs of financial assessment that you can upload in terms of if you don't want to go through the financial means assessment or that one of NSFAS. And then number 2, if someone indicates that they are financially needy, then they have to go through the financial means test or provide that proof like I've already said. So in the system, in the online system, you have a band in terms of a household income, the gross income of the household. So we have those that are below 350,000 and those that are above 350,000. So if you are above 350,000, then automatically you should be completing the form 4. You should be declaring yourself as not financially needy. But those that are saying they are below 350 but do not have proof, then they should go through they should complete the consent form, and then we'll take them through the financial means assessment. And then once we get the results from our partner ISFEP, then that's when I will be able to determine whether the applicant is financially needy. How does the process work of the financially neediness? Once you apply on the system, what we are looking for is ID numbers of the household contributors. Then the consent form is to give consent that the bank should go and then the ISFEP should go and then investigate in terms of the finances of those household contributors. So the banks will go and then ISFEP will go and then check every bank, and then we get assessment, and then once we get the report, then we are able to classify whether you are financially needy. And then ISFEP as well works with organizations such as Deloitte to do in terms of the bending of the finances of different individuals. And then those that live with disability, I've already said, they don't need to go through this system. It's only attachment of such proof. Yes. And then once you say you don't want to give consent in terms of your financially neediness, then your application doesn't have to go through ISFEP. Then you can go back to that drop down and then select above 350, meaning you are not giving any consent in terms of us going into the system and then check the finances of your household contributors. So those that have been previously, so this is the pathway for those that have been previously funded by ISFEP or NSFAS. You are eligible provided you provide proof of such assessment being done by these two organizations. And then in terms of the timelines, okay, let me skip that one. The timelines, this one is the phasing out of the old system and the new system, but because all of us or majority of us are now into the new system which started this year, so honors, because it's only 1 year, you don't have to have progression in terms of the years, but for masters and doctoral, the last phasing of the masters in terms of the extension will be in 2023, and then starting 2024, that's when now our system will be cleared of people that have been under the old condition of grants, if you were to put it that way, or the old granting system. And then in terms of the key requirements of implementing the call, what we are requiring is that in the application, some of the things that we are expecting from the students are issues of memorandum of understanding between the student and the supervisor or the head of department, because the MOU gives us, my colleagues will be talking more into this MOU in terms of what we're requiring in terms of details, but these are some of the documents in terms of, you'll have situation whereby students will come and say, but because of I don't want to work with my supervisor because there are issues, or supervisor the other way around, the supervisor will come and say, but this student, I've only seen the student once in 2021, but the student is not making any progress. So in terms of the reporting, it's a requirement for us to monitor the progress, and then this is one of the requirements in terms of the documentation. And then in terms of the payments, we'll be doing payments monthly from the NRF, the organization, the institution, and then to the students. So in terms of the stipends, the student is expected to have a transactional account whereby this transaction will be taking place in terms of monies moving from the NRF to the institution and to the student. And then the other ones my colleagues will touch in terms of the meaning of the academic support activities, and then other things that we are expecting from the relation between the institution, the supervisor, and the NRF. And then in terms of the feedbacks, the universities, when you apply as an applicant, there are two feedbacks that you'll be getting. If you get rejected at the institution will screen those applications. If you are not eligible, the students will get rejected, meaning your application will be rejected at the institution level. But those that will be sent to a reviews committee, like the masters and doctoral, whereby project outcomes, project outline will be assessed, and the originality of the project and other criteria. Then the institution as well, if you are not recommended for funding, then the institution will be able to notify you to say you are not recommended for funding because of these reasons. But your application, once your application is being sent to us at the NRF, then now the response will come from the screening level at our grants management and system administration. Then you'll get a response to say because of 1, 2, 3 you do not meet the eligibility criteria. If you meet the eligibility criteria, your application will be sent to the funding decisions. And then if you are not awarded funding because of other reasons, then you'll still get feedback. So we get queries from the applicants who will come to say, but what happened to my application? What I will urge the applicants to do is to always check on the system, the status of your application. You submit your application to the institution. From the institution level, then the application gets reviewed at the institution. If it's eligible, then the designated authority at your institution will send your application to us. Then the status now changes to sent to NRF for review. So it's very important to check at which stage is your application at, because others will come and say, but my application is at, when am I getting the results? Only to find that the application is rejected at the institution. I think in terms of I want to finish, but I think I've jumped one slide here, which is very important, colleagues. Let me just go back on how we are making the allocations. Is the main slide, is the first slide, in terms of how the principles. Oh, okay. Now that slide is not here, but in terms of, I'll share with you. I don't know why it's not appearing here, but in terms of when we are making allocations for when we are doing the awarding, the things that we look at is things like discipline spread, the issue of budget, the issue of areas of interest, which are the NRF have listed in the framework documents. We look at whether the person is financially needy. We look at the disability. We look at other things that I've already mentioned to say what informs in terms of principle. One should be aware, just because you are eligible in terms of a full cost of study doesn't mean automatically you'll be getting full cost of study, because there are other things that we look into. People will come and applicants will come and say, but why did you give me partial cost of study in terms of instead of full cost of study? So we have the priority listing, you can call it priority listing, in terms of what informs our funding decisions. Which group should we consider, the nationalities, the gender, the race. So all of this play into how the NRF decide on making. Hence, I've shown you that slide of the numbers that we have given this year. All those 5,000, where is that? All these 8,086, all of them were eligible, but the main reason they could not be funded is the issue of budget. One is aware that the NRF is budget is less than $1 billion as compared to that one of the NSFAS. One would put it that way. NSFAS is around, I think it's 38 billion, I think last time when I checked. So NRF it's less than $1 billion due to COVID and other reasons. There were budget cuts. So in terms of the investment for 2021, we are operating at around 650 million. So the numbers have reduced. So our system now has to become more competitive in terms of which people are we looking for into the system. So I would urge the applicants, whether you're already being funded by the NRF at this current year, or you are still going to apply maybe for masters or doctoral, to make sure that you check those eligibility criteria, you make sure that you attach the relevant documents so that we don't do back and forth between the institution and the NRF in terms of why are you going to come later and say, but you gave me partial cost of study, I couldn't get my proof of NSFAS and other things. So yeah, I think yes, Heide, I think for now in terms of the presentation, I think I've covered some of the grounds. In terms of the questions, maybe we can wait for everyone to present and then we can address all the questions, because some of the questions might be addressed as some of my colleagues are moving through the presentation. So we might answer it at a later stage. Maybe let me allow my colleagues as well to finish off with their presentations, and then whomever has a question, then they can come and then we can give clarity with regard to the different sessions that we have presented.
Thank you, Leganolo. Yes, we've received quite a few questions and the NRF team is busy answering them. Next, thank you for your presentation. Ms. Melissa Govender of the NRF will do the following presentation. Thank you, Melissa.
Thank you, Haida. Just going to share the screen. Good morning again, everyone. My name is Melissa Govender. I'm from the Grants Management and Systems Administration unit of the NRF. Basically, what our team does is that we manage the grants on the system, we manage the applications that come through, as well as the systems itself. So my presentation is going to be quite short. What I'm going to take you through are the allowances for 2021 and the payment guidelines, as well as the documents required for the release of funds. So getting straight into it, this slide shows the 2021 funding, and it's so you can see the different allowances. What I'm going to do now is just talk through the different allowances and discuss the payment guidelines relevant to each allowance. So first things first, as you can see for the different levels, honors, masters, and doctoral, there are two types of scholarships. There's your full cost of study scholarship and there's your partial cost of study scholarship. So let's start with the full cost of study. The full cost of study is made up of your personal care living allowance, meal or food allowances, maximum accommodation allowance, tuition fees, and your electronic study device. And then for students living with disabilities, there's the assistive technology device. Now, with the personal care living allowance and then the meal and food allowances, these are paid out on a monthly basis to students over the academic year. So, for example, if you registered for the full year, this can be paid out over 12 months. Some institutions have indicated that their academic year is over 10 months. So in that case, these allowances will be paid out over 10 months. If you register in the second semester, you will only be eligible for half the scholarship. Then when it comes to the maximum accommodation allowance, so this is based either on, if you are staying at university residence, it will be based on the invoice from the university res. And then if you are using any private rental accommodation or even university accredited accommodation, this will be based on your lease agreement, and it will be paid out monthly. A lot of questions that come in around this is, okay, so the allowance is 50,000 Rand, but my accommodation is, for example, 40,000 Rand. What happens to the remainder? Any unused funds must be returned to the NRF. Now, the same applies to tuition fees. If your tuition fee is less than the maximum amount, then the funds will be returned to the NRF. Tuition fees is also based on what is in your student accounts. Some institutions have indicated that they provide invoices, others just say they pay according to what's in the student account. So what we do allow here is that if the university has granted a fee waiver, that means the institution has decided that you do not have to pay tuition fees for the year, the equivalent amount can be claimed as running expenses that can be used for your research. So, for example, if it's a master's student and the maximum amount is 40,000 Rand, if your actual tuition fee is, say, 30,000 Rand, then the 30,000 Rand can be claimed as running expenses. And the institution can advise how this claim can happen on the institution end. When it comes to the electronic study device, we provide a maximum amount of 10,000 Rand. And when we say electronic study device, what we mean is that it's something that's required for your research. So something like a laptop. We've had requests for things like recorders, iPads. But again, the maximum is 10,000 Rand. If it's less than that, then whatever's left over comes back to the NRF. If the cost is more than that, the maximum amount we will pay is 10,000 Rand, and then the other amount will have to come from the student's pocket. In terms of this, what we expect is that the student should provide 3 comparable quotes from different service providers for the same device. These can be submitted to the research office. The research office can then advance payment, and then the student will then have to provide the research office with proof of purchase. This is all required for audit reasons. And then, as I said earlier, the assistive technology device is specifically for students who are living with disabilities. So this amount is not added upfront to the grant. There's a completely separate application process for this amount. And again, there's quotes that have to be submitted. And once it's approved by the NRF, it's then added to the grant. And yeah, okay, then partial cost of study. For 2021, your partial cost of study scholarship is only made up of accommodation and tuition. So the same rules apply in terms of the payment guidelines. In 2022, that's as of next year, what will happen is that for those students who are, say, living at home, students living at home don't have access to the accommodation allowance because there's no lease agreement in place, things like that. So this amount under partial cost of study can be converted to your living allowance. So for example, if you just take these values into consideration, under honors, for example, partial cost of study, if the student doesn't have access to accommodation allowance, they can then get living allowance, which is 12,000 Rand, for example, and that will be paid out again on a monthly basis. And that covers the allowances and payment guidelines. In terms of getting funds released, this is for a new grant. What we require is the signed and initial conditions of grant to be uploaded to the system, and this is done by the research office. We require a copy of your ID, and we require proof of registration for 2021. If you have indicated on your original application that ethical clearance is required, if it has been obtained, it can be submitted together with these documents. But in order for us to release funds, we do require the conditions of grant, ID copy, and proof of registration. The assistive device I've already talked to. Once it has been approved by NRF management, the funds will be added to the grant and released. With any of the updates for 2022, you can view the documents, the current call documents via this link. That will enable you to see some of the changes that will be taking place for next year. When it comes to continued support, so this is for your second or third year of your grants. Firstly, you have to complete the progress reports, and my colleague Busi will be talking to the biannual progress report. But in order for us to release funding in 2022, next year, we look at your final report that is submitted during November this year. I think it opens till February next year. So under your progress report, your supervisor has to recommend your report. If the supervisor does not recommend, we cannot release funds. You have to submit your report. Your institution will screen it and review it, and then they will submit the report to the NRF for review. Together with your progress report as an attachment, you can add proof of registration for 2022. We can't release funds without that. And again, if ethical clearance is required for your research, it must be submitted in the second year of your grant. It's not compulsory for the first year of your grant under the new awards, but for continuing students, it is compulsory. For this year, we were lenient with students about this requirement, but I received feedback from my director last week saying that as of next year, we will be very strict on this requirement. So please make sure that this is in order. If you submit your progress report without the ethical clearance certificate, we cannot release funds, and we won't release funds until we receive that either via the research office later on in the year. So please be aware of that. And that is it for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Melissa. Thank you for all the questions coming in. They will be answered, if not live, they will be answered in writing or lively in the question and answer section. Next is Mr. Johan de Blessier of the Noordwes-Universiteit, our financial officer. Thank you, Johan.
Morning, colleagues from the NRF. Can you see my slides, Saida? Is my slides visible?
Yes, thank you, Johan. We can see it.
Good. I am the finance officer situated in the research office at the Northwest University, and I just want to go through the process at our office side from the release of the funds by the NRF up to where you receive it in your bank account. The first process is the call for applications. It's been received from the NRF. Then the student applies for the NRF bursary. The award letters is issued by the NRF. Documentation is submitted to the research support, and grant adjustments then follow. Also, cancellations of scholarship does happen, and then the funds has been released by the NRF. After that, I need to do compliance testing to ensure that the student does adhere to all the compliance and rules set out by the NRF. Then I need to do the calculation of the NRF payment of the actual amount that needs to be paid to the student account. And then the funds gets transferred to the student account, after which the claim is then made to the NRF. When talking about the submission of documents, I have to ensure that all the mandatory documents are uploaded. That's done by Heide. We're looking at the conditions of grant. Is it completed and signed correctly? The proof of registration. Is the student registered for the correct degree? Also, things that we have to look at here is that a student is not registered maybe for a second honours degree because that's not funded. It's only in sequence of honours, masters and doctoral, cannot get funded for a second honours degree, for instance. Then the complete academic record must be there. The grade point average of the previous degree is calculated. Ethical clearance is uploaded if applicable, as Melissa was saying. It has to be in the second year, it has to be there if it was not done in the first year. And then Heidi is also uploading it on the NRF online system under the awarded UID number. Regular problems that we're encountering over here is that the conditions of grant is not submitted within the time frame by the student. Conditions of grant is not initialed on each page by all signatories. An incorrect academic record is not uploaded. A full academic record must be uploaded on the system. The grant adjustment queries that has been handled is change of institution, where a student applies, for instance, at one institution but gets accepted at another and he wants to change the institution. A formal letter to change the institution must be submitted with a motivation letters from the old and the new supervisor. When a student wants to upgrade from partial cost of study to full cost of study, a formal letter requesting this upgrade is required, and only if eligible in the guidelines as provided by the NRF. Deferment of scholarships, again, a formal letter requesting the deferment of the scholarship is provided to Heide, who is our DA, to upload that on the system. And then cancellation of scholarships, we need to inform the NRF if students is relinquishing the scholarship or not eligible to receive the scholarship. Regular problems that we're encountering here is students are emailing the NRF directly. The NRF then has to attend to these queries as well, which was supposed to be handled by the research office. And this is putting a time constraint on the release of other funds by the NRF, because they are also now handling inquiries coming from the student himself. The funding process, which is handled by me myself, I get a beneficiary report from the NRF. Now, this beneficiary report, I'll talk about it a bit later. Then I do need to do the compliance testing, the calculation of the bursary amount to be transferred to the student, and then I transfer the bursary to the bursary office. At the bursary office, the bursary is loaded on the student account. Monthly payments are calculated and then paid to the student's bank account. And only after I've transferred the funds to the student account, then I can claim the funds back from the NRF. And then after that, we receive the payment from the NRF. Now, there are students who are telling me, the NRF, when are you going to claim the funds from the NRF? That is not the concern of the student, as that is part of the work that I'm handling on in my office. So you don't need to worry about that as a student. I will do that. On the beneficiary report, that is the report that I received from the NRF that lists all the awards. And it also indicates whether the funds have been released or not. This report I receive around about every second or third week, and I update my control sheet from that. Now, regular problems that I'm encountering over here is that students' numbers are not appearing on the beneficiary report. Then that means we need to follow up with the NRF to get the student numbers uploaded. If it's bursary is released by the NRF and there's no student number on the beneficiary report, I cannot ensure that this funds will be transferred to the correct student. So therefore, it has to be. The auditors will not accept it if the student number is not there. Then cancellation of bursaries are not done by the NRF in time. We often notify the NRF that there's bursaries that needs to be cancelled, where the student does not want the bursary anymore or for whatever reason. And that takes a long time to get it resolved. And it also takes a long time to get bursaries to be released by the NRF. As you know, the NRF people did tell you the process on their side, and that is also a timeless process. So students unfortunately think the moment that the bursary is released by the NRF, it should reflect in their student account straight away, and that is not the case. When talking about compliance testing after the bursary has been released by the NRF, the internal bursary control form must be submitted by the student. Now, this is a form that we as an institution has compiled and that we're sending out to all students. And on that form, I need to verify the following information: that all info is correct on the bursary control form, that the initial surname and contact details does appear there, that the registration details appear there, the grant details. We also need to know the study leader's information, the student confirmation about other bursaries and conditions. One of the regulations of the NRF, for instance, is that you should not have a other bursary where there is a work-back clause attached to that. So things like that needs to be checked on this. Also, if a student does receive a private bursary from another institute, person or institution, I have to have a look at what is the conditions of that bursary, and for what is it? Is it for accommodation? Is it for registration and study fees? What is covered by that bursary? And then also I need to check the accommodation details of the student, and that the student was signing the bursary conditions that we also have on the internal bursary control form. Furthermore, I need to check that the student is not full-time employed by the institution, and that the student does not work as an assistant for more than an average of 12 hours per week. That is 624 hours per year. Now, I know that there are certain faculties which is applying different rules over here, like for instance in health sciences, where the student is required to work 24 hours a week to comply with their registration authorities, but then they only work that in one semester of the year, and the other semester is not calculated then because they're not working as assistants, and that so we still get to the 624 hours per year. If a student is staying in university accommodation, I have to ensure that the student account needs to be submitted to be able to verify the amount payable for the accommodation for that specific residence where the student is staying. When talking about partial cost of study bursaries, the student may receive other bursaries, but I need to ensure that the other bursaries are not government funded. So CETA, provincial government, city councils, those bursaries are not, students are not allowed to have NRF bursary as well because it's both been funded by government. If there's other bursaries appearing, as I already said, I need to check the work-back clause, what expenses are covered with the other bursaries, because if a private bursary is covering, for instance, your study fees, that cannot be paid by the NRF as well. When looking at the lease agreement, the NRF had a clause saying that it cannot be more than equal university accredited accommodation. This clause was scrapped in March of 2021 for the 2021 funding year, and maybe our NRF colleagues can give an indication with this clause will be again introduced for the 2022 academic year. I also have to look at the actual lease period, the first month of the lease as up to the last month for the current financial year. So when the calculation is done, I need to take into account how much is the actual rental amount to be paid, when was the first month it needed to be paid, and till what month is this running for the current financial year. Then also the rent payable per month, is that less than the capped amount as per the NRF, or is it more? So also, as Melissa also indicated with the equipment, if it is more than the allowed amount for that specific level of study, that means that that amount which is more needs to be covered by the student himself. And then I also need to check the landlord details, because a landlord may not be related to the student. If it is related to the student, we're not allowed to pay for the rent. The capping that is introduced is to a maximum amount equal to university-owned accommodation, which currently was amounted to 3,500 Rand per month for the Northwest University's most expensive accommodation. And this clause was scrapped in June of 2021. Now I need to pay additional amounts that need to be calculated, to be transferred to students who already received payments for accommodation up to now, to cover the rest, which might be more than the 3,500, but less than the awarded amount of the NRF. Next one that I need to check is, did the student receive any study discounts? This is staff discounts when the parents are employed by the NWU, or it's also study subsidies. Those type of things I need to check. Only the actual amount paid may be transferred to a student account if the student did receive any staff discounts. I recently had a situation where a partial cost of study student, the amount appearing on the award letter was a maximum of 50,000 for the studies. But because the parents is working at the university, the study fees was waived, so only the 2,020 Rand as registration fee could be transferred to the student account. The remaining study fee then should be transferred to the study leader to be used as running expenses for the specific student studies, as was also mentioned by a previous speaker. When doing the full cost of study bursary students, this student may not receive any other bursary. As indicated in the question and answer session this far as well, I did see that there were questions about this, and the NRF said that if the student does want to accept the other bursary, then the NRF bursary needs to be reduced accordingly. So it boils down to the same, that they are not allowed to have other bursaries. So no NWU honors, masters or PhD bursaries or NWU merit bursaries for academic achievements may be paid to these students then. Students receive actual study fees and registration fees. The student receives the food allowance, the living allowance, and then the actual accommodation allowance. Now, currently, this is a problem that I'm encountering a lot of times, that students are expecting that they will be receiving the full amount that's appearing on the award letter, which is indicating the maximum amounts and not the actual amounts for studying and for accommodation. Did the student receive any other discounts? It's the same that I need to check for the full cost of study students as it was the case with the partial cost of study students, which I already went through. Then the calculation of the bursary amount needs to be done. The actual registration fees paid by each student, the actual study fees payable by each student, take into account the discount received, if any, by each student, and that would give me the amount that gets paid and transferred to the student account for the bursary part. Then the actual rent amount payable by each student from the starting date of the lease agreement till the end date in the current financial year. In other words, if a student received a bursary, entered into a rental agreement, and the lease agreement stipulated that the first month of the lease was the 1st of March till the 31st of December, that means that student will be receiving the lease amount for 10 months because he did not stay there from January. So this needs to be taken into consideration together with the living allowance and the food allowance of the full cost of study student. In cases where the bursaries is only released in June, for instance, that means that in this example that I used, where a student entered into a lease agreement from March, the student will then be receiving a back pay at the stage when the bursary is released from beginning of March for their rent, and a monthly payment then till the end of the year for the rent, and he will receive this living allowance and food allowance as from January of this year. Students do not receive the total amount as indicated on the award letter. On the award letter, it indicates running expenses. When you talk about partial cost of study bursaries, the running expenses equals the accommodation fee that is payable by the student. When talking about the full cost of study bursaries, running expenses is made up of actual accommodation, the living allowance, and the food allowance. Research expenses like traveling expenses, language editing, books, these type of things is not included in the running expenses as awarded by the NRF. When talking about the equipment that is awarded by the NRF, the student needs to submit 3 quotations for the purchase of a laptop from different stores for the same piece of equipment. This is important to note that I did receive questions from students asking, but there might be a shortage of computers. Can I then buy something else that was on the quotations? No, you need to provide for what the laptop that you want to buy, which is available as well. You cannot now give quotations for a specific laptop and buy something totally different. The cheapest quotation then will be accepted, and the funds equal to this amount will then be transferred to the bursary office. You as a student will then need to purchase the laptop, and you need to supply me with an invoice as proof that the laptop that was quoted for was actually purchased. And if the invoice is not submitted to me, then I will need to notify the NRF about that, and the funds for that equipment then will revert back to the NRF and will be taken back because you didn't comply with all the rules by supplying the actual invoice for that as well. Should the quotation be more than be allowed 10,000 Rand, only the 10,000 will be paid and the rest would be for the account of the student. This was also indicated by Melissa in her slides that she just presented. The bursary funds are then transferred to the bursary office. The annual bursary awarded is uploaded onto the student account. Monthly amount is payable that needs to be paid out to the student is then calculated. If a bursary was released late in the year, the amount to be paid as back pay is calculated and transferred to the student's bank account. Monthly installments for the rest of the year will be paid to the student's bank account, And at our institution, at Northwest University, bursaries are paid in 10 installments from February to November. As in January, we need to have the students first to be registered, and in November we'll provide them with double payments for November and December. The bursary conditions. The NRF may not be set off against any previous debt. NSFAS loans cannot be set off against any NRF bursary. And NSFAS, CETA, NIHSS, municipality, provincial bursaries, students may not receive NRF bursaries as well, because that is seen as double dipping, because those are also being funded by the government. If we're working with get an instance of a deceased student, research report needs to be notified in order to notify the NRF. The policy of the NRF up to now was that a bursary is not taken back if it's already been paid out, but it's not been paid out, then the rest revert back to the NRF. Challenges that we're encountering: all documents are not submitted by the students. Bursaries are not released by the NRF, or it does take long to be released by the NRF. Internal bursary control forms not submitted by the student. Other government or private bursaries, previous registration for the same degree, incorrect registrations, incorrect or no student number on the NRF system, permanent staff does not qualify for an NRF bursary, unreleased bursaries are not checked for compliance, as NRF can still cancel the bursary or the student does not take up the NRF bursary. Now, I know that it is a situation that we are already halfway through the year, and a lot of bursaries is still not being released by the NRF. So at this stage, when I am handling a full cost of study bursary, and that student does have a other bursary, I don't have an issue with that up till the date when that bursary is from the NRF is being released. Then I do send an email to the student to tell the student that he's not allowed to have the other bursary, and that bursary needs to be cancelled with the bursary office, and the student then needs to send me his student account as proof that it was cancelled by the bursary office before the NRF bursary then gets transferred to the student account. The bursary office process: students need to sign in on the DIY service at the NWU's webpage at the bottom right of the screen, and there you have the screen coming up now. There students can look at the credit refunds, they can look at bursary allowances, Student 360, and the VSS password reset, which is the student system. So if you forgot your password, you can reset your password to VSS password reset. Your student account is you can get from Student 360. Credit refund is when you're having funds available in your student account that needs to be paid out to you, then you can fill out the credit refund section over here. And the bursary allowances is where you can indicate your accommodation, your travel, all of those things. And another one that is of importance is your banking details. I'll get to that one just now as well. After the request for credit refund is received by the bursary office, it takes a maximum of 10 days to process everything. But if a student does update his information on the DIY services on the Northwest University website, that decreases this time and it will be paid out much quicker and faster. The bursary has to reflect on the student account before it can be paid out. If a credit request is not approved by the system will notify the student about it, and the student will be receiving an email according to that. Transactions that's approved before 12 o'clock in the day will be processed the same day for payment to the student's bank account. If it's approved after 12 in the day, it will be processed the next day. Inquiries about payments can be done with Sonia Stein. there I did give her telephone number and her email address for assistance to the student. Students receiving monthly payments, that is now for the full cost of study students and the partial cost of study students who, as I indicated, will be receiving a monthly payment till the end of the year. Please, you do not need to fill in your credit refund. You will need to upload your banking details on the DIY so they can pick it up from there automatically, and payments for future months for the rest of the year will then be paid into your student account before the 25th of each month. Thank you very much from my side.
Thank you very much, Johan. Ms. Busisiwe Sibia from the NRF will give a presentation on the progress reporting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Heide. Good morning to everyone. Just get myself set up. Am I audible? I'm struggling with my bandwidth today. Can I just get confirmation if I'm audible to everyone?
Yes,
Yes, you are.
Thank you very much. So yeah, my name is Busisiwe Sibia, and I'm from the Human Infrastructure Capacity Development Directorate at the NRF. I'll basically be taking you through 5 slides that speak to progress reporting. The first is directed at students that have been funded prior to 2021. For students that are funded prior to the year 2021, these students are basically classified as continuing students. They will still be required to submit progress reports on the NRF online submission. Students who fail to submit progress reports will not receive continuation of funding in the year 2022. For continuing students, we anticipate to open on the 1st of November 2021 for progress reports, and the closing date will then be the 13th of February 2020. This is specifically for students funded before 2021. Okay. For new students, those are students that are funded under the new NRF postgraduate policy starting from the year 2021. You are expected to submit biannual progress reports. These are students that are funded on full cost of study or on partial cost of study. We anticipate to open for progress reports on the 1st of July 2021, and the first cutoff date will be the 17th of September, and the second cutoff date will be the 13th of February. This is across all the different funding levels on honors, masters, doctoral, and extension support. By the end of the honors degree, a student will have submitted 2 progress reports, 4 progress reports for masters, 6 for doctoral, and for extension support, it will be 1 if a student has received extension support for 6 months, and 2 reports if a student has received extension support for 12 months. These are the reporting dimensions and the milestones for biannual reporting. We'll start off with the honors. Let me just move this tab. We'll start off with the honors for the first year of the honors in the first semester. Students are required to report on program modules that have been completed. This will be done by indicating under the courses or module status. We're also expecting academic support services, a report back on academic support services. The student can attach proof. Academic support services may include tutoring, mentoring of other students, volunteering for orientation, or of new students, career days, or volunteering to provide academic support to students with disabilities, or even science engagement activities. We're also expecting an MOU, a Memorandum of Understanding, to be uploaded between an MOU between the student and the supervisor to also be attached as proof. You will see there's a red asterisk right here after the word proof. And this is basically explaining that if at the time of reporting, the student does not have the required documentation, the student and the supervisor or HOD may indicate the reasons why that particular document cannot be attached at that time, why it's not available, and then indicate when it will be available. Because this is just, we are hoping that by the first semester, a student will have an MOU, but if it happens that there isn't an MOU in place, you can provide a reason, and then in the second semester of the honors year, then attach the proof of an MOU. In the second semester of honors funding, we're expecting a report back on the program modules completed, the research project, academic support services, and then the final examination. On master's level, in the first semester, the report back will be on the literature review that has been started or completed, the ethical approval obtained, there's the red asterisk again, proposal that has been approved by higher degrees committee, academic support services, and an MOU between the student and the supervisor or HOD. And then in the second semester of the first year of master's, students will report on the research progress. This will be done by indicating online under the proposed research plan section, and then also the academic support services. On the second semester and on the first semester of year 2, the reporting dimensions are basically identical. And then for the last semester of the second year of master's, we're expecting students to report on the research completed and dissertation that has been submitted. This will, the student will basically indicate online under the proposed research plan section. Also expecting a report on conference presentation, the manuscript drafted, and academic support services. And then on to the doctoral level. On doctoral level, fairly similar to master's dimensions of reporting, except that it's got an extra year. So in the first year of doctoral, in the first semester, is the literature review that has been started or completed. Generally, it will have been started in the first semester. Ethics approval obtained, the proposal approved by higher degrees committee, academic support services, and an MOU between the student and the supervisor. The MOU is actually very important because it manages the relationship between the student and supervisor and really supports the research project for it to be completed within the requested time. And then in the second semester of the first year, it's the research progress. The student will indicate online under the proposed research plan section, similar to that of the master's progress reporting, and also the academic support service. In the second year, it's the research progress, academic support service. And then in the second year of the second semester is the research progress, conference presentations, manuscript drafted, academic support service. And then lastly, in the third year, it's the research progress, conference presentations that have been done, a manuscript drafted, academic support service. And lastly, in the last semester, we're requesting reporting on research completed and dissertation submitted, and the conference presentations that have been done, manuscripts drafted, and academic support services. Again, if any of these documents, especially within the first semester, is not available, the student will simply indicate along with the supervisor the reasons why they have not been obtained and the timelines when you expect to have obtained these requested documents. We are aware that biannual reporting may seem too much, but it's by the nature of the agreement that we have with SFAB, we are requested to have biannual progress reporting. We do hope that it might change, but as things stand, it will be biannual reporting for all students across the different levels of funding. Thank you very much. That's all from me.
Thank you so much, Siswe. We're going over to the questions and answers, live question answering. I just want to give me a second just to see which ones are available.
Ada, can I just quickly answer one question? The question was that there were students asking if they go into the DIY system, it wants a document to be uploaded for them to, as proof of they received the bursary. They can upload their bursary award letters on the DIY system.
Thank you, Johan. Okay, we've got a question here. I'm sorry, just a minute. Sorry, I'm going to answer this question. Changing from partial cost of study to full cost of study, what documents are required? The student can send a formal letter and attach proof that he obtained more than 75% and all the proof of NSFAS to the DA, but this can only be done till the 25th of June. That is the final closing date from the information received from the NRF. Legonolo, there was 2 questions that you confirmed that you will be answering. Sorry, there's so many questions flooding in. The screen keeps on scrolling.
Okay, yeah, I see the first one. I think it's from Ntlejana. Yes, Ntlejana. Ntlejana, if I'm pronouncing it correctly. So the person is asking, I'm 56 years old. My research topic is forecast uranium prices. So they're asking, because they're unemployed, whether they will be eligible in terms of, so they are querying, the way I see it, they're querying the age limit of the 30 years of masters. So Ntlejana, like I've already indicated in the beginning of my presentation to say, the data has shown us that by 22 years, 23, almost all of our the people that we are funding are already completed with their undergraduate degrees. So meaning they have close to around 4 to 5 years to pursue that honors. So from honors, then automatically you go into masters if it's uninterrupted. Then from masters you go into doctoral. And one of the things that you should be aware, for honors we only fund 1 year, and then for masters is 2 years at maximum, and then doctoral is 3 years. So if someone have completed, there is another question as well which relates to yours, Ntlejana. The person is asking, because from 30 years to 32 years is 2 years and masters is only 2 years. Remember, if you start earlier at around 24 years, by the age of 28 you might be having your masters in your hands, and then you have plenty of time, almost 4 years to do your masters, and then you progress to your doctoral. So by the age of 30 you can still be finishing off with your doctoral. And one thing, Ntlejana, that the statistics have shown that at the age of the average national age of completion in terms of the PhD, it's 41 years. So with us, we are saying that one of the NRF is 35 years. So the ones that are falling into the 41 years mostly are the ones that are pursuing a part-time doctoral or part-time studies. Hence, if you see our studies, all of them, it's full-time, meaning full-time you shouldn't be working, you should only be focusing on your studies. So you'll be studying full time, we'll be providing you either partial cost of study, full cost of study. So by the end, before the age of 35, you'll be starting now to be productive into the research environment and then pursue other endeavors. I think I've also answered that one of Mhlari. Mhlari is the one who was asking about the gap between 30 and 32 years. So we should look at it from that age of years of 22 years, 23 years. By the time you reach 30, most of them already have doctoral. The other one, hey there, I think it's only these two that I've marked. The other ones, I think they need clarity. If someone maybe can pose the question live and then we can address such question, because in the chat, you know, it has different interpretations. No, I think for now, hey there, let me stop here. Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Legunola. We've got a lot of questions coming from the students of funding that's not been released yet. To answer most of those questions, I've suggested that the students send me an email after the session with the, if possible, the UID number, so I can follow up. If the funds is released by the NRF, I can follow up with Mr. Johan to see if there's any information outstanding, so that the funds can be released.
Just to add there, Ada, the students should just note that once the funds are released by the NRF, there is a process that I need to follow and do all the calculations and everything before it can be transferred to the student account.
Thank you, Johan. Unfortunately, I can't answer all the students that has the same. A lot of students is anonymous, but they're more than welcome to email me afterwards. My email address is 253-77167@nwu.ac.za. Just repeat it, 253-77167@nwu.ac.za. I just want to see, there was another question. Here's a student from Anonymous. Mr. Duplessis, will the payments you made into the bank accounts as stated in your presentation or in the student account? Meaning the students still have to claim the money from the university and wait the internal time, which currently takes 10 to 5 working days. Johan, can you just answer the student there?
I'm transferring the funds to the bursary office. The bursary office is then uploading it on the student account, so it will show as a credit on the student account, and then the bursary office will be paying the back pay to the student from the beginning of the year and taking into consideration the beginning of the lease agreement up to now, and then from now on a monthly basis to the end of the year. But the student needs to upload his information, his banking details on the DIY system, so that the bursary office will have that available to be able to do the payments.
Thank you, Johan. Just an answer to the slides is available with the NWU. We will just get the necessary permission to share the slides to all participants afterwards. Is that in order with the NRF?
I can also just tell you, Haida, that this is recorded and it will be available afterwards on the NWU YouTube channel as well.
Thank you, Johan. Is there any of the other colleagues that still has more information for the students?
Yes,
Just
Haida,
to,
I'd like to come in there. Sorry for not raising my hand.
no
I
problem.
see a lot of questions refer a lot to the guidance on how to complete an extension support application.
Yes.
And I'd like to advise all the students to go on the NRF website and read the DSI NRF application and funding guide. It provides a step-by-step guide on how to complete all applications, whether it be honors, masters, doctoral, or extension support. It's very detailed. You won't get it wrong, but you are required to go through that document. It's almost impossible for us to respond here on the chat. But if they go through that document and also the framework document for the eligibility criteria, then they will definitely get it right.
Yes, just to follow up on this, there's funding for next year. The call is currently open for masters and PhD, but I think the internal closing date was moved from the 18th of June till the 30th of June. And our colleague Boitamela Mglulu and Ms. Funanani Lavelani can be contacted. The information is also available on our website with the closing dates and with the links to the call. The honors applications only closes later the year, but they're more than welcome to contact our colleagues in the pre-award session to assist them with the applications. Then we've got a question here. As an international student doing a joint degree, UFIC, do I have chances of being funded while applying for the general scholarship? Melissa, can you perhaps assist the student?
Sorry, Haida, can you please repeat? I was just
Sorry.
typing on the chat.
I'm sorry about that. Now the question is jumped here. It's a student that is an international student doing a joint degree in UFIC. Is there any chances of being funded while applying for general scholarship?
Okay, so the way the system is designed is that you can only submit one application. So you have to choose between NWFIC and general scholarship.
Thank you, Melissa.
Thanks.
If we can also answer all the questions that's still available afterwards directly to the students, on the we can still answer. If there's anything else from any of the colleagues?
Melissa, I just want to find out the working hours of the students for next year. Is it still going to be a maximum of 12 hours as assistant, or are you planning on bringing back that clause that say they have to work 80 hours unpaid assistant?
As far as I'm aware, the 12 hours will still be in place. For next year. Are you referring to the academic services when you say 80 hours?
Yes, originally there was a clause stipulating that students need to work an unpaid assistance of academic support, something like that, of 80 hours per year. And then it was not introduced when finalizing the conditions for this year. But it seems to me, I've picked up on some documentation that might be the NRF is looking at that again for next year, is it not?
Busi, I see your hand is up. You can go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Yes, Johan, it is. It's stipulated that the academic support activities for 80 hours per annum of unpaid service. Those were the activities that I went through, the tutoring and mentoring that students will be expected to do. They can get this information in the document, the key expectations document, where it details exactly what those support activities are.
Thank you.
Thank you. Then I see Prof. Anel du Plessis has got a hand up. I'm not sure if we can connect with her directly. Prof. Anel? Okay, nothing.
Leandra, can you open Prof. Anel's mic, please?
Thank you very much, colleagues. I appreciate all of the presentations this morning. Colleagues from the NRF as well as the NWU, thank you for having clarified many of the questions that I think supervisors and students alike have had the past couple of months. I just have one question, and I'm not sure whether any of the colleagues of the NRF will be able to answer, and that is the implications of the new funding model for the kind of work being done in the research chairs, the SARCHI chairs specifically. And I'm asking this question as the chairs have been designed in a way that it is also possible and sometimes even necessary to provide additional bursaries for students involved in specific research projects, etc. Is there any way in which we could apply for a reconsideration of some of the general rules applicable to bursary funded students, full cost of study as well as partial cost of study? That's my one question. And then the other big concern that I'm having is that universities and faculties are now being precluded from awarding students for academic excellence. I am not too sure why this is the case. And I'm just wondering and actually worried that we are going to support mediocre work and that we are going for an egalitarian system where everybody is treated exactly the same with no incentive for academic excellence. Thank you very much, colleagues.
Hi, Prof. Thank you for the questions. This has been brought up before. With respect to the SARCHI, your first question about SARCHI, at the moment, even our colleagues at the NRF are struggling with this a bit, but at the moment, no, you cannot ask for any changes with respect to the FCS and PCS, the conditions of grant with the SARCHI. I'll still use the term grant holder linked scholarships. We are trying to find ways around this. I know this year there was Nana and team sent out an ad hoc call because the current SARCHI grant holders were struggling to find students, and it is a problem. My suggestion there is that you speak to the funding domains about that, and so it'll be Nathan, Nana, Simon as well about that, and see if they can bring it up with executive management. That's the only thing I can speak to really. I don't know, funding domain colleagues, do you want to address the second question? Thank you.
Melissa, what was the second option? The second question, because I clearly had the one for SARCHI, but my understanding with that one of SARCHI, it's like the previous speaker was asking more about us relaxing the eligibility for the SARCHI, the students that are falling within the SARCHIs. So just to add on you, Melissa, in terms of number one, I'll get number two clarity when I get there. The system, the way we've designed the system at the moment, when I started with the presentation, is that everyone should come through the same system, same rules, and then same treatment. So we are not saying we are not taking serious other fields or priority fields or areas of studies or the research work which is being done at different institutions, different facilities. So what we are saying is that everyone should get an equal chance of being treated, and then we treat everyone using the same criteria. So the issue of eligibility, that one is standard across for everyone. So the student will come and then apply, but the bursary belongs to the students only in terms of the running expenses and other components. That one belongs to the facility or belongs to a researcher. So we had cases whereby the students are being attached to a certain researcher, to a certain researcher, then the student wants to move to a different institution or different facility. Now they cannot move because the money is being attached to such research or such facility. So the system now makes it flexible for applicants or awardees or grant holders to be able to move with the portion of the scholarship, not the running expenses. Maybe if the previous speaker can just repeat the second question, then just for me to get it clearly. Hello?
Rofanel, can you just repeat your second question?
I can do so. Thank you. Also to Ms. Govender for her answer. I understand that many of these questions may be at a managerial level, but the one that I've had, which I hope that we can have answered here, is why in, for example, the SARCHI system, we are putting a bar on universities and even faculties to provide additional financial support to students, where institutions are in a position to do as much. While I understand the financial constraints on the NRF, and there is no expectation on the NRF to provide more bursary money at this point, especially for full cost of study, why would we want to preclude other funding institutions from supporting students? And I'm pointing specifically to something like a merit bursary. Why can't we pay out merit bursaries for students who, for example, received their previous degrees cum laude? Why are we barred from providing such incentives for performing students? So that was really my question.
Okay, thank you for that question. With regard to the merit bursaries, what we are saying in our conditions of grants is that we allow, you can use it as a top-up. We use it as a top-up if we give you full cost of study, but there is shortfall in terms of accommodation and tuition. So that money for merit bursary can be utilized for topping up those two categories. But in terms of other categories, living allowances and other categories, food allowances, then because the NRF has already taken care of such component, so we do not allow any top-up. The other top-up that we allow is under full cost, partial cost of study. So the merit bursary at the end of the day must equate, when combined with the NRF, with the value of the NRF must equate to the full cost of study of the NRF. And one thing that we should be aware of is you have many students in the system whereby they have both the NRF and then other funding from different funders. Then they come to us and say, but I want to utilize all the monies. And then within the system as well, you have those that did not get funding, like I've demonstrated in the presentation to say we have around 8,000 of those. So what do you do as an institution to say, is it okay for someone to have a combined bursary of 300,000, whereas you have someone who doesn't even have partial cost of study, whether they are under the research chairs or whatever, but is it okay for the institution? What good does it do into the system? So what we should be thinking about is, the system, how do we make impact in the system? In the beginning of my presentation, I've demonstrated that one of the objectives of the NRF policy is to give access in terms of addressing challenges such as unemployment, inequalities, and poverty. So if someone has, we are not saying that they are not brilliant students, we acknowledge they are brilliant students, but hence our condition of grants says you have to choose which one becomes your primary funder. But that one of academic achievement or academic performance, that one should be reduced and only used as top-up in terms of accommodation and tuition. But other funders, when they want to fund the student can choose to say, but you NRF, you are giving me less money, I want to go for these ones, is still okay. We'll take that money back and then reallocate to someone on the waiting list who could not be funded because of budget constraints. But we do acknowledge that we have such brilliant students, but our policy dictates that we should impact the whole system using these different modalities. Thank you. I hope it answers some of your concern, Prof.
Thank you very much. I don't want to deliberate this point too long, and this will be my last remark.
Okay.
I just think that, and
Hader?
sorry, I'm not sure whether anybody heard what I was just saying. I thought that I was unmuted. Could someone just indicate whether my last input was heard?
No, I didn't hear anything. I think you
Okay,
get.
all right. Okay,
Yes.
I'll try and keep it brief. Thank you very much for that response. I think my plea is that the NRF reconsiders its policy in terms of the categories where top-up would be possible. And the reason being that the campuses of this university, the NWU, are all situated in towns where generally accommodation tends to be slightly cheaper in comparison with, for example, Durban, Cape Town, or Johannesburg. And also our degrees are relatively speaking cheaper than many other universities. So what it effectively means is that an NWU postgrad student would not need top-up funding in the accommodation or in the cost of study, the registration categories, but they could very well use it in some of the other categories, living expenses, for example. So my plea is really that we try not to negatively affect the NWU students because of where our campuses are based. Thank you for that response and also for the opportunity to speak. I'm done now. Thank you again.
Okay, Prof. Thank you for that input. We are taking notes.
It's Johan again. I just want to come in here on what Prof. Anel said. Currently, our study fees and registration fees added together are much lower than is the case of the actual amount that is awarded by the NRF. And in 99.9% of the instances, our accommodation is also lower than the allowance. So the additional amounts of additional bursaries cannot be used. So we have to have that cancelled.
Hi, Johan. Yes, I do hear what you are saying, and the same applies to other institutions as well, where the costs are much lower. But unfortunately, the way the policy is designed at the moment, any unused funds have to be returned to the NRF. It's only if there's a fee waiver under tuition that those funds can actually be used for running expenses at the moment. However, we will take this up going forward because a lot of institutions have us basically saying the same thing as well. Thanks.
Thank you, Melissa. It seems to me that Heide has got a problem with connectivity at the moment. So is there anything else that we can discuss? Any other panelists that want to answer some of the questions?
Hi, Johannes. I'm getting a lot of questions on the chat about unused funds and running expenses. And I just want to bring to everybody's attention that there was a document called the Statement of Expectations that went out with the call last year, and it's even out with the call this year. Basically, the scholarship should not be used for running expenses. It's only if there's a fee waiver. The reason being, if you look at the Statement of Expectation, there is a section, I think, called Supervisor Responsibilities. And it states there that the supervisor should provide the required running expenses for the research project. So that's why the unused funds get returned to the NRF and are not used for running expenses. Thank you.
Johan, I think there is another question from Anonymous. The Anonymous is saying the NRF did not create an enabling system for funding students. We are losing students as a result of this system. So I'm not sure it's whether in terms of the supervision or in terms of the enrollment. But one of the slides which was missing from my presentation is that we have different modalities. I think my colleagues have already touched on the grant holder linked and other different categories. So if you have students that you are interested in, then you wish them to work within a certain project, a certain facility, then you encourage such students to apply online. You can either give that student, if you are currently a grant holder of the NRF, one of the chairs, you can provide such student your unique identification number or your application reference number to say when you apply to the NRF, this is what you should insert under that reference section. Then the applications will come to us, and then during the funding decisions and then during the assessments, then we are able to identify such students to say these students are the ones that belong to so and so as a researcher at this institution. So in that way, that's how we are able to track such students, provided they meet the eligibility criteria. So as a way of identifying such students, it's only through the use of such things as reference numbers to say these students are the ones that are working within this project, which is already in existence, and then we are able to process such students, and then as compared to the pool of students whereby you have 8,000 which could not be funded, but you find that your students were within such number, but because of they were not identified during the application stage, then such students end up not being identified. I think it answers the question of the anonymous. Yes. Thank you, Johan.
Thank you. There's also some questions that I picked up on that students are asking about other bursaries which they are receiving. I just want to repeat what I said with my presentation. I did not previously tell the students to cancel those bursaries because the NRF releases were late. So when a bursary of a student is being released by the NRF, I will send an email to that student asking him to cancel the other bursaries at that stage, because and then they just need to send an email to the bursary office to have that bursary of them then cancelled. Also, this applies to the merit bursaries. They also need to be cancelled. They're not allowed to have them either. Thank you. Any other questions that you need to answer of the panelists?
Johan, one of the questions that came up about what you just spoke about was that the student indicated that they had outstanding debt and they were advised to take the NWU bursary to use to offset that debt. My understanding is that because the NWU bursary was used to offset the debt, it was not used for the current degree, then the NRF scholarship should not be affected by that, because it's not for the current degree that is funded by the NRF.
In that instance, the student I need to have an email from the bursary office that indicates that that bursary was for the previous date. In a lot of instances, the bursary office also indicates then on the student account that was related to a previous year. But if it's not the case, then I need to have an email from the bursary office indicating that that bursary was specifically for the previous date.
Thank you so much, Jan.
Any other questions? I see there's some students asking when can they expect payments for 2021. I would suggest you send me an email afterwards because I need to look into your specific situation, whether your funds has already been released by the NRF, whether we still need some documentation like your bursary control form, things like that. Send me your personal email and I'll respond to that. Here's another student asking, since the university is paying for 10 months for accommodation, are we allowed to stay at a 12-month accommodation place? Yes, you are. We are paying in 10 installments. So when the bursary is released at this stage, we'll be giving you a back pay from beginning of the year, and you'll be receiving pay till the end of the year, and in November you'll be receiving a double payment for your rent. So that's no problem. We handle that, but we only pay out 10 times, but we will cover all of that. Any other of the panelists, more questions that you need to answer?
Johan, I think there's still a hand from the SECO. I'm not sure if the hand is raised. I'm not sure if they want to ask a live question.
Leandra, can you open up the SECO, please? The SECO, you can go ahead. The SECO.
Good day, everyone. Is it possible for me, because I already submitted, will I be able to edit some of the information I got?
You're breaking
Sorry,
up. Can you just repeat the question, please?
I just want to know, is it possible for me, because I've already submitted the NRF application, so will I be able to edit it?
What do you need to edit on your application, Deseko? Your sound is very bad, but I think the best would be to send an email to Haida, and she'll be able to respond to that.
I heard that.
No, we cannot hear you. You're breaking up a lot.
Things that I've missed. My faculty were not allocated the supplies. Okay, I will definitely do so.
Please send an email to Haida and we can respond to that afterwards.
Okay, so I will definitely do so. Thank you.
I just want to mention that students must please be aware that we are working with a lot of students, and we need to answer the emails that does come to us. So please be patient. We will attend to your emails.
Are you on? Sorry for asking this last question. I just wanted to ask if you can please just send your email address on the answer sessions again, just for us to email you. And I would like to ask for Busisiwe to also do that. I just want to ask her a question regarding the academic services. Thank you.
Okay. I will do that.
Thank you.
Maybe I can just ask that you just write that in the question sense in the question box, so I can answer that and everyone can have it.
I already did, Johan. It's at the 11:50 a.m. question I asked. Can you please send your email address?
Oh, I might have missed that. Thank you. I'll have a look at it.
Thank you.
I've just answered that, Colleen.
Thank you, Johan. I see it now.
Any other questions that needs to be answered, colleagues?
Johan, may I ask a question? It's Wilhelmine du Plessis. Sorry, I'm on a Nels. It's coming up. It's Wilhelmine, and I have a project grant with the Netherlands, for example. It is a huge grant and it's stretched over 2 universities. It was awarded last year, and we were told that the system will not apply to the students from this grant. Many of the students have been institutionally approved, many of them at the University of Voltaire, but they have not been approved by the NRF system. Are there any way that I can find out when the bursaries will be approved? They are all needy students. They are all sitting in Voltaire and or in the rural areas, and we have not received any answers yet.
Melissa, can you please respond?
I actually don't know anything about that grant, and I don't deal with the grant holder linked students any longer. So my understanding from what you said is that these students did not follow the process under the new policy. So they did not apply online last year and have their applications approved.
Yeah,
correct?
That's correct. We can nominate students in terms of this grant, which we did on the system. Some of them have been approved, but not all of them yet. So they didn't follow the system as it was. This grant was already awarded, I think, before the system was introduced.
Oh, okay. So, so from my understanding with the normal grant holder linked scholarships, it's only continuing students that can be nominated under the grant for this year. All other students were supposed to have followed the process of applying online last year for funding this year. If, however, you do have an agreement in place with whoever's managing this project as well at the NRF, then it needs to be taken up with them. Unfortunately, I can't answer that question. I'm so sorry. Do you want to email me and then I can take it up with the relevant person?
Thank you. Yes, I also emailed him, but he didn't come back. So I will send the email again, and thank you. I will contact you too.
Okay, great. Thanks.
There's a question that popped up regarding the study leaders being responsible for running expenses. I want to find out, may the study leader apply for funding from the institution to cover such expenses? I think the student misunderstood it a bit, because the amount that is not paid as the study fees, because the student received a discount on that, whether it's because his parents is working at the university or a study subsidy or something like that, that amount is then transferred to the researcher for the use of the specific students' running expenses. We are in process of opening a new type of account in the accounting system for that as well. So students do not need to worry about that. That's why I need the information of the study leaders on the control form as well, so that we can contact the study leaders and provide them with the details, and also then to transfer the funds to the study leader for use of the running expenses for the student. The organizers of the webinar will also email the questions that was asked to us as panelists, and we will also be able to see if there's any other questions that we did not answer, that we can then answer that per email. So if there's anything else which we need to address, we're welcome to do that. If not, then I think we can end the session, and we can follow up with emails on the specific questions that needs to be answered. NRF colleagues, Litlogonolo, anything else that you want to mention?
From my side, Johan, it's not much. I think the information is out there in terms of what needs to be done for someone to meet eligibility, in terms of documentation, in terms of the selection. Our processes are transparent. I think for the past 2-3 years, we've been making it transparent so that the application can know what to do, how to do it, when to do it. So other issues, I think they are more specific to the NRF. The other ones are more specific to the institution. Hence, you've said those questions will be sent directly to us, and then we can address them on individual cases if needs be. But overall, I think the information is there. The applicants need to just follow the rules. I normally call them the rules of engagements on what to do, how to do it, when to do it, and then they should get everything right, and then we shouldn't have any crisis. No, I thank you, Johan, for today's present session, and then it gave us some insight on some of the issues. We'll take back some of the issues and then revert back to you and some stakeholders within the institution and outside the institution as well. Thank you, Johan.
Thank you, Litlogonolo. Just for interest's sake again, I just want to mention that the recording of this will be available afterwards on the NW YouTube channel as well. So students can refer back to that as well. Melissa, anything else from your side?
No, nothing. Thank you, Han. Thank you so much to you and your team for inviting us. We always enjoy engaging with institutions and students. So thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you very much for your assistance as well, and for your presentations as well. We do appreciate it. Busisiwe, anything from your side?
Much for hosting us. I just echo everything that Litlogonolo said. Thank you very much, colleagues.
Thank you. Then I think we can end it over here. And as I said, and also in the chat, there were some specific questions. The students can feel free to send us emails. We are working with 500 plus students, so just bear with us. We will get to you to answer your questions as soon as possible, and also refer back to the presentations on the YouTube channel of the NWU, and you can get your answers over there as well. Thank you very much. Thank you all.